I'm joined now by the New South Wales Premier Chris Minns. Thank you so much for coming on, Premier. Today's school protest, let's get straight into it. Was it appropriate?
Well, look, no, I would prefer kids stay in school. At the end of the day, if you want to change the world, go and get an education. And certainly anyone that left school today to take part in that protest will be marked down as per a normal unexplained absence in a New South Wales public school. I'm also, I've got to say, a bit concerned about the idea of striking against school. Education is incredibly important, and we want young citizens to get knowledgeable and understand the world. That's really only going to happen in the classroom.
Your police minister has been accused of inciting a port blockade. I think that was by the opposition leader. It was Mark Speakman. Look, she appeared to be fairly encouraging. She certainly didn't discourage it. Does he have a point?
He doesn't, and I'll tell you why, Erin. I mean, what the leader of the opposition has said about the police minister and the government in the last 24 hours is that there's an incitement of a protest at the coal loader in Newcastle. What he didn't disclose is that that protest has taken place each year since 2016, and the organisers have put in a Form 1 application. And it's difficult, the police and the government are in a difficult position because the organisers can quite justifiably say, well, we've been doing it every year for the last 6 years. The point here is that police have been working to ensure that any disruption is as short as possible, as safe as possible, and we can return to working order on the port in as quick as time as possible. And obviously I'd prefer there was no disruption at all, but this situation isn't perfect. We've got to try and manage it.
So are they playing politics then? Is that what you're saying on a pretty crucial issue?
I'd say more that it's hypocrisy. I mean, if you're going to slam the Minister for Police about a protest at the Newcastle port, you've really got an obligation to disclose that under your government, when you were the Attorney-General, the same thing happened since 2016, and that didn't happen. Now, that's probably politics.
I was going to say, does that make it okay if just because it's happened under someone else, it can keep happening?
No, it doesn't, but it does. I think I'm entitled to make the point that because a Form 1 was lodged by the protesters, it's more difficult for the government to reject it on the basis that it has occurred every year for the last 6 years in New South Wales. I mean, ultimately, we want to manage these protests so they're in and out as soon as possible. There's hundreds of millions of dollars worth of infrastructure on that port. Even minor repairs that are required to take place on the port could disrupt it for months. And I think that trying to balance that disruption against some people's willingness to disrupt the port almost on a daily basis, if they could, is a difficult one to manage, and I understand why the decisions were made.
We've got new hate speech laws in. I want to actually ask you, different to what I'd originally planned on asking you, I want to ask you how difficult it is for you as Premier to navigate what is going on in the world at the moment and so many different views. Ukraine, Russia, majority of people in Australia see Ukraine as the victim, Russia as the aggressor. This war in the Middle East, very divisive. How difficult is it for you? You've been so strong when it's come to anti-Semitism, but you must be feeling pressure.
I don't think it's that difficult at all, if I'm going to be honest, and here's the reason why. Protest is lawful and legal in New South Wales, but there are strict rules in place in relation to hate speech and racial vilification, and anyone that incites violence on New South Wales streets will be arrested. New South Wales Police have arrested 56 people and laid charges for a variety of offences since the early stages of the war in early October. And I think as long as everyone understands that the police will enforce the rules that are on the books and we can navigate a very difficult and tricky situation. But from my perspective, it's crystal clear. Protests are legal, but we will not tolerate hate speech in New South Wales.
You've publicly called out the federal government and the Prime Minister, and this is onto a new issue, for trying to halt infrastructure projects in this state. It's a brave move. Did private talks not work?
Well, we always want to give peace a chance, and obviously we've got an obligation to try and make it work, but I've got to say that New South Wales is on track to receive about 24% of infrastructure spending from the Commonwealth Government. That's despite the fact that we've got a third of the population. We'll take 37% of inbound immigrants over the next few years, and we contribute enormously to the GDP of the country. So we need more infrastructure dollars from the federal government. And look, I appreciate that a lot of this has been baked into the cake by the Morrison government, and the Albanese government has inherited that. But regardless of why we're here, we are here and we need a better share or a fairer share of federal government distribution, because we need that enabling infrastructure, particularly for housing.
Is it an easy relationship to manage with the Prime Minister? What's your personal relationship like with him?
It's good. It's strong, but New South Wales premiers and prime ministers obviously notoriously sometimes have rocky patches. I mean, I'm confident we can navigate it, but I'm trying to get the facts out, and I think we've got to be transparent for New South Wales taxpayers in particular. We contribute an enormous amount of revenue to the Commonwealth Government through income taxes, and we need our fair share of infrastructure spend for the state. We want to build public transport and roads and new housing. We can't do that by ourselves. We just don't have the deeper pockets that the Commonwealth does.
Premier, I want to ask you finally, and it's something that I've spoken to you about privately as well. Your Minister for the Prevention of Domestic Violence, Jodie Harrison, admitted to not having ever spoken with the Police Commissioner. That was more than 7 months into the job. I was blown away by that, to be honest with you. This is an issue that I care deeply about, which I know you know, and I thank you for reaching out to me afterwards. Is that good enough?
Well, I think it's important to note that the Minister did introduce legislation this week in relation to continuing detention orders for those who've been convicted of strangling offences, primarily because there's an 800% chance that the victims of a strangulation will be murdered by their partner in the years ahead. So we're taking serious action, and it's been led by the Minister for the Prevention of Domestic Violence. What she didn't disclose in that hearing is that she has had many meetings with the Deputy Commissioner, the Assistant Commissioner, the other Deputy Commissioner who's responsible for domestic violence, and they've got line or day-to-day responsibility for that policing portfolio, for that policing action in the state. So I think a reasonable person would say that the Minister for the Prevention of Domestic Violence has had many meetings with senior members of New South Wales Police. So
do you have confidence in her, Premier?
Needs attention.
Do you have confidence in her? Because this is a very, very important issue. Do you have confidence in her?
I do have confidence in her.
Okay.
Absolutely, I do, Erin.
That's enough for me then.
As evidence of that for the public consumption, as evidence, I'd say, look at the new laws introduced this week. They're important and they'll make a difference.
Okay, Premier Chris Minns, thank you so much for joining us. First time on this show, so we really appreciate it.
Anytime, Erin. Thank you.
Thank you.